Elvis was visiting the children's cancer ward at Baptist Memorial Hospital when he took a wrong turn and ended up in the terminal care unit. As he walked past one of the rooms, he heard a weak voice call out, "That's Elvis Presley, isn't it?" When Elvis stopped to visit with what he assumed was just another fan, the patient said something that made Elvis's blood run cold. "You probably don't remember me, but I'm Billy Patterson. I pulled you out of that car wreck 15 years ago." Elvis stared at the man who had saved his life in 1958, now dying alone with no visitors, no family, and no hope. What Elvis did in the next 48 hours didn't just change one man's final days. It revolutionized how America treats its emergency responders. It was November 14th, 1973, and Elvis was making his monthly visit to the children's cancer ward at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. He had been doing these visits quietly for years, bringing toys and music to kids who were fighting battles no child should have to face. Elvis had finished reading to a group of young patients and was heading back to the elevator when he took a wrong turn and found himself in the adult terminal care wing. The atmosphere here was different, quieter, sadder, with the weight of final goodbyes hanging in the air. As Elvis walked past one of the rooms looking for someone to ask directions, he heard a weak voice call out, "Excuse me, that's Elvis Presley, isn't it?" Elvis stopped and looked into the room. In the bed was a man who appeared to be in his early 50s, though illness had clearly aged him beyond his years. He was thin, pale, and connected to various machines, but his eyes were alert and kind. "Yes, sir, I'm Elvis," he replied, walking into the room. "How are you doing today?" The man smiled weakly. "Better now that I've met the king. I'm Billy Patterson." Elvis shook Billy's hand gently, being careful not to disturb the IV tubes. "Nice to meet you, Billy. Are you a fan of music?" "Oh, yes," Billy replied. "Been listening to your songs for years. But actually, we've met before, though I don't expect you to remember. It was a long time ago, and you were pretty banged up at the time." Elvis looked more closely at Billy's face, trying to place where he might have seen him before. "You probably don't remember me," Billy continued, "but I'm the ambulance driver who pulled you out of that car wreck 15 years ago, March 23rd, 1958. You were driving that pink Cadillac and you hit black ice on Highway 51. Elvis felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. The car accident. How could he have forgotten? It had been one of the most terrifying experiences of his life, and if not for the quick actions of the ambulance crew, he might not have survived. Elvis sat down heavily in the chair beside Billy's bed, memories flooding back. To understand why this recognition hit Elvis so hard, we need to go back to that March night in 1958. Elvis had been driving from Memphis to Nashville for a recording session. It was late, around 11 p.m., and he was alone in his distinctive pink Cadillac. The roads were icy from an unexpected late winter storm. As Elvis rounded a curve on Highway 51, his car hit a patch of black ice. The Cadillac spun out of control, skidded off the road, and rolled down an embankment, finally coming to rest upside down in a creek. Elvis had been knocked unconscious in the crash. The car was filling with water, and the doors were jammed. If someone hadn't found him quickly, he would have drowned. Billy Patterson had been working the night shift for county ambulance service. He and his partner had been returning from another call when they spotted the pink Cadillac's headlights shining up from the creek bed. "That's not normal," Billy had said, and they had pulled over to investigate. What they found was Elvis Presley unconscious and trapped in an overturned car that was rapidly filling with cold water. Billy had waded into the creek, used a crowbar to pry open the passenger door, and pulled Elvis to safety just minutes before the car would have been completely submerged. Billy had performed CPR on Elvis until he regained consciousness. He had stayed with Elvis during the ambulance ride to the hospital, monitoring his vital signs and keeping him calm as he drifted in and out of consciousness. "You kept asking about your mama," Billy told Elvis now, 15 years later. "You were worried about her finding out about the accident. I promised you I'd call her personally and let her know you were okay." Elvis remembered now. He remembered waking up in the hospital and asking about the ambulance driver who had saved him. But by the time Elvis was fully recovered, Billy had moved on to other emergencies, other lives to save. "Billy," Elvis said, his voice thick with emotion, "you saved my life." "Just doing my job," Billy replied. "But I'll tell you, it was exciting to save Elvis Presley. Made for a good story for years." Elvis looked around the hospital room. It was a standard terminal care room, but it felt empty. There were no flowers, no cards, no personal items that would suggest family or friends visited regularly. "Billy, where's your family? Your wife? Your kids?" Billy's expression grew sad. "No family, Elvis. Never married. Been on my own most of my life." Elvis felt a profound sense of shame. Here was the man who had literally saved his life, and Elvis had never followed up, never checked on him, never even properly thanked him. Now Billy was dying alone in a hospital with no one to care about him. "Billy, what's wrong? What are you sick with?" "Lung cancer," Billy replied matter-of-factly. "Too many years of smoking and breathing in exhaust fumes from the ambulance. Docs say I've got maybe 2 weeks left." 2 weeks? Elvis was shocked. "But surely there are treatments, things they can try." Billy shook his head. "I can't afford the experimental treatments. Been living on a small pension from the ambulance service. Health insurance doesn't cover the newer cancer treatments." Elvis couldn't believe what he was hearing. Billy Patterson had spent his entire career saving other people's lives. He had pulled Elvis from a car wreck, performed countless emergency rescues, and dedicated his life to helping people in their worst moments. Now he was dying alone because he couldn't afford medical care. "Billy," Elvis said, "how long have you been here in the hospital?" 3 weeks now. They're keeping me comfortable, but there's not much more they can do." "Have you had any visitors?" Billy's smile was sad but not bitter. "Not really. Most of my old colleagues from the ambulance service don't even know I'm sick. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone." Elvis made a decision that would change both of their lives. "Billy, you saved my life 15 years ago. Now it's my turn to help you." Billy started to protest. "Elvis, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not looking for charity." "It's not charity," Elvis replied. "It's a debt. A debt I should have paid years ago." Elvis called his personal physician, Dr. Miraculous, from Billy's hospital room. "Nick, I need you to get down to Baptist Memorial right now. I want you to examine a patient named Billy Patterson and tell me what can be done for his cancer." Within 2 hours, Dr. Miraculous had reviewed Billy's medical file and consulted with oncology specialists. "Elvis," Dr. Nick said privately, "his cancer is advanced, but there are some experimental treatments at MD Anderson in Houston that might help. They're expensive and not guaranteed to work, but they could potentially give him months or even years." "How expensive?" "Probably $50,000 to $100,000. "Do it," Elvis said without hesitation. "Whatever it costs, do it." But Elvis didn't stop there. He realized that Billy's situation represented a larger problem. Emergency responders who had spent their careers saving others but couldn't afford to save themselves when they needed medical care. Elvis established the Billy Patterson Emergency Responder Medical Fund that day. Starting with a $500,000 donation, the fund would provide medical care for ambulance drivers, EMTs, firefighters, and police officers who couldn't afford treatment for job-related illnesses and injuries. More importantly, Elvis arranged for Billy to be transferred to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, where he would receive the best possible care. "I'm going with you," Elvis told Billy. "You didn't leave me alone in that creek 15 years ago. I'm not leaving you alone now." The next 3 months became a journey of healing for both men. Elvis rented an apartment in Houston and spent weeks at Billy's bedside during the treatment. They talked for hours about Billy's career as an ambulance driver, the lives he had saved, and the satisfaction he had found in helping others. Billy had hundreds of stories about emergency rescues. He had delivered babies in the back of ambulances, talked suicidal people down from bridges, and performed CPR on heart attack victims. But he had never talked about these experiences with anyone who truly understood their significance. "You know what I've learned doing this job for 30 years? Billy told Elvis during one of their conversations. "Most people are good. When there's an emergency, people want to help. They just don't always know how." The experimental treatment was working. After 2 months of chemotherapy and radiation, Billy's tumors had shrunk significantly. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his prognosis. But more than the medical treatment, Billy was being healed by something he had never experienced before, someone who genuinely cared about him. Elvis had not only paid for Billy's medical care, but had also become the family Billy had never had. They watched TV together, shared meals, and Elvis even brought his guitar to the hospital to play songs for Billy and other cancer patients. Billy's transformation was remarkable. The lonely, dying man Elvis had found in the hospital terminal ward had become someone with renewed hope and purpose. The cancer treatment was working, but the emotional healing was just as important. "Elvis," Billy said one day, "you didn't just save my life. You gave me something I never had before. Someone who cares whether I live or die." "Billy, you've got that backwards," Elvis replied. "You're the one who gave me something. You showed me what real heroism looks like. Not the kind that gets you famous, but the kind that saves lives when no one's watching." After 4 months of treatment, Billy was declared to be in remission. The cancer was gone, at least for now. But Elvis wasn't finished. He hired Billy as his personal emergency medical advisor and arranged for him to live in a small house on the Graceland property. Billy's job was to coordinate the Billy Patterson Emergency Responder Medical Fund and to be available for any medical emergencies involving Elvis or his family. Billy threw himself into the work with the same dedication he had brought to ambulance driving. The fund grew rapidly as other donors contributed, and within 2 years it had helped over 200 emergency responders receive medical care they couldn't afford. More importantly, Billy became like family to Elvis. He was someone who had known Elvis before the fame, who had saved his life, and who understood the responsibility that came with helping others. Billy Patterson lived for 8 more years after his cancer treatment. During that time, he became one of the most respected advocates for emergency responder health and safety in the country. He testified before Congress about the need for better health insurance for EMTs and ambulance drivers. He helped establish training programs for emergency medical technicians. When Billy died in 1981 at age 60, his funeral was attended by over 1,000 emergency responders from across the Mid-South. Elvis delivered the eulogy. Billy Patterson spent his life pulling people out of wrecked cars and burning buildings and getting them to safety. But what made Billy special wasn't just his technical skill. It was his understanding that every life has value and is worth saving. Elvis looked out at the sea of paramedics, firefighters, and police officers who had come to honor Billy. "Billy taught me that being a hero isn't about being famous or getting recognition. It's about showing up when someone needs help, even when it's dangerous, even when it's difficult, even when no one will ever know what you did." Billy did that thousands of times during his career. The Billy Patterson Emergency Responder Medical Fund continues to operate today, having provided medical care to over 5,000 emergency responders. The fund has also lobbied successfully for better health insurance and workers' compensation for EMTs, paramedics, and other first responders. There's a memorial at the Memphis Fire and Emergency Services Training Center that reads, "In memory of Billy Patterson, who understood that the highest calling is not to be served, but to serve others, especially in their darkest hours." The story of Elvis and Billy Patterson reminds us that we never know when our paths will cross again with the people who have helped us. Elvis could have visited Billy politely, maybe sent some flowers, and moved on with his life. Instead, he chose to honor a debt that most people would never even have remembered. Billy had saved Elvis's life in a moment of crisis. 15 years later, Elvis saved Billy's life in a different kind of crisis, the crisis of facing death alone and forgotten. But more than that, Elvis made sure Billy's final years had meaning and purpose. He turned Billy's experience and expertise into a legacy that continues to help other emergency responders. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is remember the people who helped us when we needed it most. Billy Patterson had pulled a young man out of a car wreck in 1958, never expecting to see him again. That young man grew up to be someone with the resources and compassion to return the favor when Billy needed it most. The measure of success isn't just what we achieve for ourselves, but what we do with that success to help the people who helped us get there. If this incredible story of life debt and paying it forward moved you, make sure to subscribe for more amazing true stories about the power of gratitude and remembering those who serve others. Share this with someone who works in emergency services or who believes in the importance of honoring the people who risk their lives to save others. Have you ever been helped by an emergency responder, or do you know someone who has dedicated their life to saving others? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more inspiring stories about the heroes who show up when we need them most.